No, thank you very much. That's much better. So quick show of hands again. We had this already, but I need some things covered. So how many people do own Bitcoin currently? Please show your hands. Okay, so that's like almost 2/3 of the room here. How many people have a kind of a working definition in their mind what tokenization actually means and to what extent it can apply to the real world? Okay, now we have like 1/3 of the room. Okay, good. And then last but most important question, who knows these guys? Okay, that covers pretty much the whole room. Very good. Asterix and Obelix. So this is very important. You have to keep that in mind because we're going to revert to that later on. This is a picture from Asterix Conquers Rome. So what am I going to speak about today? We've been working very closely with German regulation in order to bring a financial instrument onto the blockchain. And finally, after me gaining 15 pounds and 9 months, we did it. So in theory, right now, you can already tokenize funds, like financial instruments when it comes to collecting money for a project. You can tokenize funds, you can tokenize bonds on the blockchain. You cannot, for example, transfer direct ownership rights of real assets, such as real estate. I'm going to go through quick. Later on, we have time for questions. So, in general, there is equity, debt, and mezzanine instruments. Everybody heard about it. Equity is I own a share in a company or an asset. Debt is I give money, I lend money, and then I receive some some returns and the principal back at some point in time. Mezzanine is a mix between both of them. So what we are going to look at is specifically bonds and then something called a revenue participation note. So look at this. This is what a bond typically looks like. And now we need to dump it down a little bit because what is a bond? A bond means you all are giving me money, then I buy or build something with it. I'm going to pay you back, for example, monthly premiums, and in the end you get back your principal. So when you leave the stage, please leave the money up here. That joke went better in Kiev last week, all right? So then I'd like to break it down to the most essential parts. When we talk about a security token bond, what are the categories we need to have a look at? First, we have an issuer. So now I'm issuing a bond when I collect money from you in order to buy something, and you would be the investors. So beyond that, we have a regulator, because obviously when you talk to a lot of people about investments, there is some interest that everything adheres to the existing regulation. So then we have certain gatekeepers. You need to know your customer. So there you have companies specializing in that. These would also fall into the category of intermediaries because, for example, I am giving out a bond. I need Clearstream as an intermediary because everybody who is investing in my financial instrument needs an account with Clearstream that costs money. So I mentioned KYC. Gatekeepers also fall in the category. It's an exchange where you can actually trade the financial instrument. You can buy and sell bonds from specific third parties. And there needs to be a payment step involved because at some point I'm going to pay the issuer money to receive the bond, and that needs to be settled and cleared through an intermediary. We have done a tokenization project for a biochem company. So they are located in Karlsruhe, and we're talking about 7.9 million. They came up with a really cool patent to replace 10 sites that you find in all washing detergents and have like 100-fold applications. So what did we do? We basically talked to 822 investors, and in the end ended up saving more than 60% during the traditional, or instead of using a traditional way of structuring a financial instrument. So what happened? I'll walk you through quickly, step by step. First of all, we talked to several jurisdictions, so you have to know the moment you issue a security, it's not for whole Europe at once, but you have a German security and then you need to structure it according to a certain principle. In this case, it's called Wertpapierprospektgesetz. Very complex term that basically says you can passport that same prospectus that you did to different countries with a translation. So we did everything in one solution. So let's look at the different cost levels. We have a revenue participation node. For the ones that paid attention, we have debt, we have mezzanine finance, and the revenue participation node is a mezzanine instrument. Basically says, you participate in my profits, but you also participate in my losses without actually having voting rights. So you give me money, I pay you back a principal, but you participate in my profits. So usually, structuring a prospectus costs you around 80K only from a legal standpoint of view. Then you have primary emission. You need somebody who's actually marketing and distributing the whole thing for you. That's 80 grand again, roughly. And then we have deposit costs. So everyone needs an account on Clearstream that costs you €3 a month, which is 36 a year. So multiply that by 822, or even larger number of investors, and you have additional costs that you incur every single year. So in this case, it would have been around 3.7% of the total investment volume. So what we did is basically we put it on a blockchain. The same thing on the blockchain costs you a fraction. So here we have a token contract, rather easy. Now it's, just you can code it in a few small steps. It's not that complicated even anymore. You need a solution for whitelisting distribution because only investors that you know and that are, for example, not from the US can participate in such a sale. And you have wallet costs because obviously these investors, they receive a token upon which the interest is accrued and the principal is paid back on, and that needs to be hosted and you need a custodian solution. So there's a couple of cost blocks as well, but in the end we drove down prices by a lot. So we are not below 0.1% of the total issuance. So there was savings, which is very good. But now what really kicks in the end is not only that it's cheaper than before, but now you have some things that didn't exist prior to blockchain. You have transferability and you have tradability. So that means you can actually trade it now on a secondary market freely. And why did I show the guys from Asterix and Obelix? So I'd like to give you a very, very quick how-to guide to actually get there. And for that, we're going to quickly watch a section of the video.
We don't want to go to the court. We want a copy of permit number A38. Permit number A38!
Yeah, there's no need to shout. Where did we do our right to do that? The bad window, nothing but left-hand corridor, last one on the right.
What is your business? We just want a copy of permit number A38. You have been misled. You have to apply window number 2. Next door to this one? No, that one is with a H. I can't remember where they put number 2. Ask them. This is the plan.
Can't make it out at all.
No, here it is. Window number 1 is on the ground floor, first corridor on the right. Permit A38.
Filling this form and then we'll be able to get the pink form.
What pink form?
The one you can order to get permit 38, windows round, second floor, staircase to the corridor here.
This is how I went after going through the whole process, because there actually is a recipe. And it looks a little bit like this. Just as we Germans like it very structured, it is in fact more structured. So here's the official guide how to structure a financial instrument that you can assign a prospectus to. And it looks like this. So very quickly we're going to take this apart and dump it down a little bit again. So first of all, there is a very specific set of rules, what needs to be in the prospectus, how the prospectus is structured, and what kind of different areas need to be covered. Secondly, then you are assigned a specific process how you have to hand in the prospectus. The procedure is also requiring you to have certain formats, to have certain aspects covered and adhere to a very specific timeline. And then in the third part, you basically have a couple of options what might happen next. In theory, there is a timeline of 21 days, unless the regulator has questions. So make sure he doesn't. And in order to achieve that, we wrote a lot of legal memos. We actually put this all together and we sent it to the financial authority. We finally received word from them and finally had this one stamp. So in the end, what we did was thinking a lot, working a lot, putting everything on paper, and then getting 2 papers that told us now it is possible to have a revenue participation note issued on the blockchain, which wasn't possible before. Last time there was applause, but hey, okay, that's fine. I'm good without scene applause. Thank you. It doesn't feel forced, that's fine. So step-by-step guide, basically you have to look at a lot of legal codes. So these boxes are the legal codes. I'm not going to deep dive into everyone, just talk to me and Sebastian, our CTO, after the speech. Okay, so this is the basic structure that we build up. So you do have a security. First of all, you need to structure the conditions, what this instrument looks like, under which conditions you can participate, and then you bring the whole thing on the blockchain. In this case, we used a modified version of the ERC standard on Ethereum, and then you need basically a box for investors, a box for the company, and somehow the fonts do not match, but that's fine. You have a wallet for the investor, you have a wallet for the company, and then we build everything so you have one solution, everything comes together. You can basically buy the security online after you've been whitelisted, then you participate in the earnings from the company, and upon majority you get paid back the principal. So what is the standard process? Because obviously we did some learnings and tried to build a robust model how to do this and multiply it over the time. We don't accept any client requisitions anymore unless we have a clear-cut discovery in place where we really understand the issue at hand, what we're trying to achieve. Then there is a lot of legal memos, you saw it, until you can actually proceed and get a go from the regulator that what you intend to do is actually possible and within regulatory framework. Then we do a feasibility study that goes down step by step and really looks at all the details, whether we can do it with this token code and whether we can talk to this jurisdiction, whether we can allow US investors or whether we can't, if we have to tie it together with the Regulation D from the US and Wertpapierprospektgesetz in Germany, passporting it to up to 27 countries. Everything that's in the European economic area can be addressed. And so then we start the launch. So basically, client gets a report, we prepare the launch, and then we set it off, and we can have investors participate. Quick summary, that is unfortunate, however, the funds are not built up. So we built a tool that allows you to basically build your token and get everything from day one, legal, framework, assessment, what you want to achieve, the discovery with the legal framework that we look at, until you actually launch your token sale. You have full KYC, we have payment systems, module integrations, and you can launch it end to end. And so this is the company that we did it for. They are the rhamnolipid producers, very new kind of tenside, and that is us. If you have questions afterwards, I was told to be rather quick. I think that was best time. So, any questions? Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. You said several times, and we put it into the blockchain. As a Bitcoin maximalist, if you say the blockchain and not a blockchain, I consider you're talking about that.
Very good point, thank you. He's actually quite correct. It is not the blockchain, it is a blockchain, and in this case, it's the Ethereum blockchain. I will double check the presentation later if we wrote the blockchain or a blockchain. Okay, great point, thank you. Any other questions? Who has assets he wants to tokenize them? Anybody owns a house? It applies to real estate too.
Actually, Thank you. Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. It's very relevant to one of the potential projects we are discussing now. And as I understood you...
Let me give you my card later, that's fine. We talk later. Yes.
And as I understood, it's the KYC is quite important part of this structure. KYC?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And do you have any difficulties, like if you have like a totally token digital business, do you have any problems to find the right partner? So the KYC partner who is doing KYC for you, who is also accepting this model and works with this model. Or it's like very easy to find this?
Actually, it's a standard process by now. I'm not going to advertise any of our KYC providers, but that's standard. So you have a specific rule set you have to implement depending on the instrument's structure. So if you go beyond a certain threshold of investment, there is stronger or stricter KYC. If you stay below a certain threshold, even just if you provide the information yourself, how much money you have, even that might not be true, it's sufficient from a regulatory standpoint of view. And so KYC is standardized. AML, it's a little bit more complex because you need to look at more data points. Yeah, I hope that answers your questions, but please let's continue conversation afterwards.
The last question for the gentleman in the second row.
So, what do you see? What are the future challenges within this sector? Not sort of having too much concentration and aspect on the legal side, but more of if I am an issuer, for example, I want to make sure that the distribution that takes part when you trust somebody, that actually occurs and that actually happens, and you actually get investors on board, even though it's a fraction of the cost what it costs to other companies. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
It's actually the most interesting question, because at this point, what I feel, and Jürgen probably would agree, the whole industry is very fragmented. You have people always giving you one piece of the whole chain, of the whole end-to-end solution, but nobody's integrating it end-to-end. So you have people writing your token code, you have people giving you legal advice and structuring a prospectus, you might have marketing and distribution companies, but nobody is giving you everything from one point to the end. And so there is a race for commoditization. What we are seeing right now, the market is flooded with money. So there is one, like an ISO standard in the future that will prevail in marketing a STO from inception to actually, successful investor calling and closing.
Thank you, that was a good answer.
Thank you, Christian.
Talk to me when there's any more questions later on.